Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavatu arahatu samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? So, it's one of my favorite topics. I don't know what will come out of my talk, but I love this particular topic because it's the epitome of paradoxes in Buddhism. You know, paradoxes, the thing that we can't think twice at the same time, it's just how can I stop thinking? When I saw the title, because I actually didn't choose the title, I just chose a date, really, and I like the title. It's like, once you stop wanting not to think, your thought might stop. When you realize that you might actually stop thinking when you stop wanting to stop thinking. So this is a whole program, isn't it? How do we do that? So the first thing I like to ask is there anyone here in this room who wants to stop thinking? Come on, don't be shy. We're just international here, not England. We're not England. It's not. Who wants to stop thinking, really? Oh, it's a minority. No, not many. So maybe you can just leave the room. The one. Joking. Who does not want to stop thinking? Oh, it's an extraordinary thing. So the whole group in between, neither stop nor not stop. What do we do with that? So I think maybe it's a sign that some of you have realized that one doesn't need to stop thinking, really, to stop thinking. The first thing I'd like to ask you is, for those really interested in the topic about how do we stop thinking, is maybe to realize that there is a time in our life when we discover that we have a mind that cannot stop thinking. And maybe not all of you have discovered that yet. When you realize that the mind can be really, you can recognize how much your mind is in free fall. It just cannot stop, creating thoughts. And most human beings are in that predicament. Most of human beings are thinking, never really looking back and say, who is thinking? Who is thinking? So when we recognize that the mind thinks when it does not need to, the mind starts creating thought forms when it's completely out of sync with reality, which means it creates realities that have nothing to do with what's actually happening. When your mind itself is creating something other than reality in the here and now, then some of you might think, I think I'd like to look at that a bit more closely, so I make sure that what I'm writing on the board of my consciousness is actually what I want to write on, which are thoughts. What am I writing on the mind? So maybe some of you really want a peace. Maybe you want to feel confident and happy. But you keep writing, this, I'm really miserable. I hate myself. I'm a nobody. I'm just kind of can't cope with things. I'm just meant to be miserable for the rest of my life. I will never get out of this misery. Now, you may not think consciously like that, but isn't it an atmosphere in oneself sometimes that make you feel that you will never get out of that misery? So the first thing to recognize is what is our relationship to thought and who is thinking? This is the most common question when people start a Buddhist meditation retreat or start being familiar with maybe meditation. The first thing is maybe they have had an experience of a peaceful, quiet, free from thought mind. And then the next thing what happened is that, oh, sister, how can I stop, how can I make my mind not think? No, you can't. Wouldn't it be nice if I said, shut up, keep quiet? But it doesn't. Have you noticed? Your mind doesn't obey easily. Mine doesn't. I don't know, maybe I'm just unique. I should say stop. And I used to love when Ajahn Sundara used to tell us about how he tried to stop thinking when he was in Vientiane. He was a Saminera, just started his monastic life, and he tried to stop thinking and just stop thinking. And the more he said stop thinking, the more the mind would kind of react into a massive attack of thinking again. He did not know, obviously, how things worked yet at the time, But the way he was expressing it, he was aware that that's the way the mind worked. He said, mind is not really who we are. Our mind is a conditioned personality. It's a conditioned mind. It's not, it's not ours. And so, you say to the mind, stop thinking. That's really when you recognize your mind is not yours, because if it was really yours, it's supposed to stop thinking if you say stop. But it doesn't. A mind has its own life. So the fact, you notice many people, try to meditate, especially in certain parts of the world, try to meditate, and when they meditate, if they see thoughts, the next thought is, I am getting it wrong. I'm not meditating correctly. My meditation is not good because I'm thinking. So they try like crazy to try to shut down, and they sit and they look really intense and concentrated to really suppress any thought coming up with the face tight and wrinkles in the middle of the forehead, and really try really hard to stop thinking. And that is actually the quickest way to end up in a psychiatric hospital. If you really want to fast lane to a psychiatric hospital, just try to stop thinking. Because the mind, it's not a problem. Why should the mind just does its own thing? Just like your digestive system has a lot of gurgling and a lot of things going on when you digest something, don't you? Huh? And your mind, that's its own little gurgling called thoughts. It just gurgles away. So, when people say, how do you stop thinking? I say, don't worry about stopping thinking. Just begin to make peace with your thinking. You begin to find a relationship with your experience in the present moment that is one of freedom already. At that moment, you can already be free from thought by the very fact that you are looking at your thinking mind in such a way that you're not getting entangled. We're just an observer, a witness, a seer of your mind. Now, that's not going to sort out everything. Looking and observing the mind that can think really sometimes obsessively, and it is really it's quite scary when you are listening to a mind that is unable to stop. It's scary because thoughts are powerful, aren't they? They're very powerful, and at first we tend to think that our thoughts are just a personal affair, and they don't really go very far. Unfortunately, when there's not much mindfulness whilst you're thinking, they go far away, more far than you think. They affect your environment, and they affect yourself and the people around you. So let's say, if for a certain time you have thought of envy or jealousy or anger, okay, that will create a whole world that follow behind that thought. You have the body is affected by that thought, those thoughts, that which can manifest as an emotional response, which can manifest as they are right, I'm wrong, I'm right, they are wrong, etc. We start creating a world of complication, a world of, proliferations, and we get completely sort of lost in this world. So, the question is not how can I stop thinking, but how can I understand what makes me think in the first place? Why do I want to think? Or do I want to think? Or is it just happening beyond my control? Ask yourself. Questions are very good because they really stop you thinking sometimes. Who is thinking? I know. So-and-so said that, and so-and-so said that, and Bhante did this, and this monk said that, this nun, or whatever, Or the books, or Wikipedia, or dictionary. So when you, when you really are interested in this topic, the process of understanding, what is thought and why does it manifest in the first place? To begin to notice, when is it that my mind is most prone to go into obsessive thinking? When is it that my mind is most prone to go into, a kind of thoughts about worrying, thoughts about this or that? Most of the time, there is an emotional charge behind our thoughts. There is a cause. Thoughts don't happen just like that. And I began to study this particular topic myself, before I was a Buddhist nun in London. I was still a dancer, and I was waiting for a bus on Euston Road, just outside the school where I was connected with. And I noticed that, I began to see somebody thinking in there, but it's not me. Who is thinking? It's so bizarre to suddenly have this detachment from thinking. I did not know. I thought that was my thought, Suddenly, I hear somebody having a whole commentary about something. You don't need to know all the details. But it's like, I'm not interested in this commentary. Who is thinking? Who's doing it? And that was really startling for me to kind of find that I had somebody in me that was doing the thinking, and it was on me. I mean, it sounds maybe abstract for many of you, but it was very real when it happened to me. And I began to be really interested. So I think there's the first thing in an exploration is to be interested, isn't it? Without interest, are we really ready to explore? Why should we explore something if there was no interest? Right? So for me, that really brought me to this level of, wow, how interesting. And of course, as soon as you're interested in these things, you find that your life is taking you to different places, different situations, different things. You find a book, you find a person, you find something, a situation that helps you in this interest to understand what's happening. Yes? So we rather get buried, in books, in already made kind of answers and already made kind of recipes about how to do this and that. We haven't got often, maybe even the energy to explore or the level of interest to make it a priority in our life. Maybe we go to Amaravati for a weekend retreat, and then we go back home and we get buried under work, responsibility, or that sort of thing, and then we forget about it until you realize you go back and you say, you hear again this kind of obsessive mind that just can't get off the train kind of thing. It just keep going. So this interest requires energy and capacity to sustain the question, who is thinking? Now, I have never found anybody thinking. You may still wonder, maybe somebody is thinking there, but it's not. It's just thought passing through. Now, as you meditate, you see this more clearly. Anybody who's been on a meditation retreat has had the leisure to sit nicely cross-legged on chairs and to listen to their thoughts. Oh, right. And he did this and he did that. Oh, that idiot. I can't stand that. Why did they? How dare they? It's like, you shut up, And you're on meditation retreat and quietly sitting and, you're thinking of a lovely teacher who's been giving a talk in the evening, maybe for a few seconds, and then, I'm going to get that person, really to tell him off, and that job, I hated that job, and all my life, my mother hated me, and he goes like, okay, so space, like clouds, the teachers, says clouds in the sky, and everybody's, yes, yeah, mind is happy. Okay, yeah, he's right, she's right, yeah, it's clouds in the sky. It doesn't affect anything, you notice, when you're on retreat, a little bit, maybe, but nothing like in real life, when you are back at home with your family. And yet, I want to tell you that if you're really interested in the practice, at any level, if you really want any result in your practice, which means insight, any really understanding, you do have to have that kind of attention and interest that grabs you, That's really vital for you, because we're talking about a vital subject here. We're not talking about just going on holiday in Corsica. We're talking about the mind that thinks and that does not think. Isn't it a major topic? It's like the difference between creating the world and not creating it. It's mega. Seeing delusion and non-delusion. Oh my God. Isn't it extraordinary? Through the Buddhist teaching, we can actually, the mind that is deluded, continue to create delusion, and can stop. Now, isn't this worthy of interest? And I'm sure we all try. And you know how hard it is also, isn't it? Because the law of gravity, the law of habits, and the law of conditioning is heavy. It will drag you down the same old ruts, the same old route. So the first thing with to stop thinking is really not minding to think. That's what I say to people on meditation. When you stop minding, your thought might just actually feel a bit less stress. Do you understand? Thoughts are little entities, if you start fighting with them all the time, the mind is stressed. Not only stressed by thoughts, which are mostly redundant most of the time, have nothing to do with the present moment. It's a past, it's finished, it's gone, But not only that, you are creating more thoughts to get rid of them. That's exhausting, an exhausting program. So the first thing is to accept the fact that as human beings, we are thinking beings. That makes a difference between us and the next stages in the life of species, So the fact that we think, and we have an instrument called thoughts, and it is a wonderful instrument, isn't it? Amazing instrument. It's the part of you that can actually questions, the part of you that can make a difference between what is skillful and unskillful, the part of you that can, start maybe really reflecting, contemplating. That can create a world of wisdom, through wisdom, through understanding. And so these thoughts are extremely helpful when they are, wise, when they are really a good, leading you to to happiness, leading you to peace, leading you to deeper understanding and insight, leading you to living really in a way that makes you feel confident, makes you feel worthy of yourself, makes you feel a good person, So when you stop clinging to the idea that think. And maybe right now, when I said, who wants to really stop thinking? Right now, you might just feel quite happy at Amaravati, and maybe you're not riddled with a stream, a river of thoughts, But sometimes remember how in your daily life you get caught up into stories from the past, stories about the future. And for some reason, you can't shake them off. They keep clinging to you. They come back like ghosts, They have a ghostly feeling. They keep going back again and again. You can't shake them off. So just like everything else, the way to letting go in the practice is to, first of all, stop thinking, You stop imagining that you yourself are in charge of your mind. The only thing that's in charge of your mind is the part of you that is aware, the mindfulness aspect of your mind. As soon as you're mindful, it's amazing how thoughts stop. Many of you have been at the retreat center at Amaravati or elsewhere, and you've noticed, in my experience, as soon as I'm aware, my thought stops. There's no room for that. There's no room for the presence now and thoughts. It's interesting. Now, the thing I had to work with, for me, wasn't so much the thought stopping, it was the emotional feeling to not think. Do you understand? We like our thoughts. We can't live without them, most people in the world. We can't live. It seems like our world is gone. But, when we stop thinking, we feel our world is gone. And for a long time, we can't imagine that we can actually respond to life and the world without having to think about it. We think, I have to think. Different, isn't it? You don't imagine that thought can deal with themselves without you. They don't need you. They come by themselves. You notice that? They come by themselves. But now you can see that there is a capacity for the mind to bring up thought when they are needed. When they are needed. We don't need to go on override thinking. And what is the source of all this thinking? Ask yourself, when have you been, from a peaceful state of mind, from a feeling good and happy, suddenly you start churning thoughts, Well, most of the time there is, much of our thinking patterns come from, you notice, when you start worrying. Have you noticed? When you start worrying, you can't stop thinking about the past, about the future, about anything. Worry. Isn't it an extraordinary source of, thinking? When it's absolutely useless. Worry is only useful when you can see really the uselessness of worrying. When you can see that really clearly and consciously, you worry consciously, then and see that it leads nowhere. So when you worry about something and you start feeling that you start going in a kind of speed train, into trying to find a solution, Anna, it's okay, it's fine. We can just, I think everybody is kind of wondering what's happening. We start, there are other things that are the source of your worry and overriding thinking. Many sources of the mind that cause the mind to not be able to stop thinking. One thing is a belief that there is a future. In our daily life, we have a regular reflection on, I could die today. The time can stop. And I still worry, don't we? We still worry. And again, for me, I recognize through my practice that the world can carry on and sort itself out. Much, much better when I don't worry. Now, of course, you're going to say, well, how do I stop worrying? You don't need to stop worrying. You just need to understand what's happening when you worry. Understanding, insight into the thoughts that come when you worry. You begin to look at your consciousness, you listen to all these potential disasters that could happen, potential wonderful things that could happen, and you start enjoying it. It's sweet to listen to a mind just as it is. Your relationship to your mind become much less stressful. Because one of the most important things in our, in our inability to stop thinking is that our relationship to thoughts is very stressed. We are constantly reacting to them. I like this, I don't like that, I want this, I don't want that. I'm a bad person, I'm a good person, I'm there, he is, she is, they are, we. It complicates everything. So notice that when you begin to even have an intention to say, I am going to learn to be at peace with this train of thoughts. I'm going to learn to be at peace with an obsessive thinking mind. Suddenly, the level of stress starts diminishing. Instead of fear, you have a sense of confidence. It's okay to have a mind that cannot stop thinking when you don't relate to it, in the way that it needs to be got rid of. You don't need to get rid of a thinking mind. You don't need to get rid of thoughts. No, don't need to. They can go when you stop believing those thoughts. And one of the genius of the Buddha's teaching is that through a direct access to the mind, you begin to see what he called the three characteristics of all phenomena in the whole universe, from what he says, but we can look at it in our own universe here, phenomena in here, and one of them is this thinking. Thoughts are actually, once you begin to look at them quite closely, you begin to see thoughts do not exist in themselves. It's your grasping that makes you feel that they are solid. It's a grasping at them, clinging, holding, identifying. You become the thought of, I am this, I am that. I'm a woman, I'm a man. I'm tired, I'm asleep. So if you believe that thought in yourself is not conscious, then that's what you become. You become it. I've tested it so many times. I don't give a chance much to my mind. I mean, not that I don't. I'm sure I do give still too many chances for my mind to be believed. But I know for sure that the mind is a liar. I have no doubt. It rarely tells you the truth unless it's wisdom. Rarely tell you the truth. What I mean, it's not, I don't think the mind lies consciously. It's just deluded, It's just living on perceptions, on thoughts, on ideas and so on, which are, they pass their dates. Do you understand? They're not current anymore. They're memory. They're not real. They're not adapted to the reality of now. They're not adapted. You still, I could say like, cheese and yogurt. You still basically feeding yourself on out-of-date material. Do you understand? It's out of date. It doesn't smell very good. And when you digest it, it's quite indigestible. That's why it's really important to really get a handle on reality Because otherwise you're always sort of, living from the past into memories, into, if our memories, everything is treacherous in a way, in the sense that if the memories are good, then you feel very disappointed if it's not as good as the past. And when they are miserable, then it's, any intelligent person would want not to have to churn again and again an old miserable misery. Now, if we were in charge of our mind, of course we could do that, but you notice we can't. They keep coming back, Thoughts keep coming back. They keep coming back. And, the reason why I feel very confident about the fact that, when we stop wanting to stop thinking, then mind can stop thinking, truly. When I was in America, I was a cook on one of Ajahn Sundara's retreat. I volunteered, and I was cooking in the morning with a very nice gentleman there who was living in the place. And then, I was very, very interested in cooking. There was not much kind of outlet for creativity. So even though I didn't particularly like cooking before I became a nun, once, there was not much to create, I started creating delicious dishes, And so I was doing off mimosa, I don't know if you know this kind of thing, and pizza and all sorts of things. And all afternoon, I'll be carry on cooking in my meditation. Hours of cooking, multiply pizzas and all kind colors and shapes and, it was just, and because I was a perfectionist and, I didn't have much patience, so I felt, oh my God, what am I doing? And I was really upset. I was annoyed. Of course, I was trying to be really mindful of being upset, being really irritated, annoyed and angry and, I was not even judging particularly, but I just felt this shouldn't be here. That should not be here. What am I doing? My retreat is lost, I can't meditate anymore. It's not a waste of time. And then I did that for about 3 days. And after 3 days, this is a jewel, this is why I love this path in a way, because you do get a bit of help, you don't know where it's coming from, but at least from your mind maybe. But a few days later, 3 days or something, I was just like struggling, and go the eggs this way and that way, and the mimosa, and some pizza and a quiche. I think I'm still struggling. So God, I understand that. And suddenly, a little voice, just in the silence of my attentiveness, because I'm really sharply attentive to that, with like saying, should not be here. There was a little message. It's like a little letter, from wherever. If you cook all morning, what are you going to think in the afternoon? Now, it's not logical particularly, is it? You could cook all morning and not think in the afternoon, could you? Well, it was just adapted to me. It's a special letter to you, a special message to me. Because as soon as the message came, they was like, haha, okay. And this whole scenario stopped. Magic, just like magic, was finished. And for me, this was a compassionate message. It's like, stop struggling, Sundara. This is what's happening. When you cook, whatever happened in the morning, you carry on cooking in the afternoon. It's normal. It's completely normal. If you've been upset with somebody in the morning, you might be upset all afternoon. Now, I'm not saying it's normal for you, but at the time it felt that, okay, that's what happened. And when it stopped completely, really completely, it gave me some clue about how to go about for the next obsession. Because everything is, works the same way. If you're obsessed with any thoughts, it's like, why are you obsessed with thoughts? What is it that's doing this? And when I was, when you actually look into it, you begin to see it's vibhavatana. That's a Pali word. It means not wanting what you have, not wanting to become these thoughts, aversion. The desire not to have that experience, And we don't think so. But when I was talking just only recently with a lady, and she was telling me about her thinking, and she said, I think, and I think, and I think, and I think about this, and I've done years of meditation, and I still think. And I say to her, are you okay with this thinking? I just innocently, I say, is that okay to be? She said, oh no, I hate the thinking, I just can't stand that. And just a few seconds before, she'd been telling me all the things she was doing to stop thinking. It was like going through a night. She was waking up at night, and she was telling me all the methods and all the techniques and all the things that she knew about how to stop, to decrease this thinking. I said, well, that's very good, but do you mind when you think like that? Of course I do. Of course, that gave me the clue. Yeah, you are averse to your thinking. No wonder they keep going. You fuel them. You fuel thinking as soon as there's aversion or identification, through wanting them or not wanting them. And this is when you begin to see how much why the Buddhist teaching is centered around the meditation practice, because it would not make any sense for you to go through all this interest in looking at the mind if you did not see cause and effect, how one thing brings another, how one thing leads to another, So if you're miserable, you will see that the mind start wanting not to be miserable. None of us want to be miserable. But then we get preoccupied with the thought that comes up out of this state of misery, rather than to notice that the state that come up are actually the result of not seeing clearly the cause. And the cause is just maybe a feeling, a mood. And that mood start creating, bringing up memories, not even thinking memory, it's like physical, emotional memories. It's in the body. It's like almost cellular memories can start being manifesting. It's just something very deep, and you don't know why. Sensations suddenly, and then if you did not know that this is what's happening, you start wanting to get rid of it. Don't want it. Anything that we find difficult, you just don't want it. We are not wired up to be miserable. If we are miserable, is that something in you is just gone into a bad habit. We're wired up, our survival is very dependent on a certain amount of well-being. That's why we do so much. We think so much about what to do to feel good, to feel well, because that's the way we can really, survive, just physically. If the mind is constantly miserable, and constantly negative, constantly in pain, then at some point the body starts being sick. Do you understand? So, okay. So remember that, that thoughts without understanding can turn really against us, makes us believe things that do not exist about ourselves, about others, and needs really a serious questioning. Who is thinking? And what's happening here now? Is it in harmony with reality? Or is it just my imagination? Is it in harmony with reality? Or is this just a result of my own frustration? Is it in harmony with what's happening now? Or is it just conditioned by something that happened in the past and make me believe that it's going to happen again? So, this is important to question. Now, the second thing, so there's a kind of, aspect of, kind of diagnostic. What is thoughts? Who is thinking? And what is the nature of thinking? Sometimes very happy thoughts are very good effect on us. In intention in the Buddhist teaching is very important. Like the thinking, what you think, what you intend. Happy thoughts are very, very positive for your mind and body. And so, there is the use of thinking in the Buddhist teaching. We don't need to stop thinking, but through our meditation practice, which is a remedy, you could say the remedy to to this world of thinking that some of us, many people, would wish to have it stopped for sometimes. And you can see how in society we have many means of stopping to think. We drink, we sleep, we take drugs, we annihilate consciousness, basically. We stop being awake. So it's a serious subject, to how can I stay awake in this life, which is quite fraught with a lot of difficulties and suffering, and be able to navigate through this world with, with the wisdom, the compassion, and the understanding that is needed to not get caught up and identified with my life. Yes? So when you look at the mind, and in meditation we look at thoughts, and begin to see that, that they are truly changing, transient, and not me. My consciousness can be empty, it can be filled with thoughts, and then it can sometimes become these thoughts when it's identified. When you've lost awareness and you absorb into a train of thoughts, and you are that thought at that moment. When you are jealous or angry, when you are upset, when you are, irritated or frustrated or whatever, if you absorb into that thought, you become it. That's why it's so important to start really looking into the nature of thinking and looking at what do we do with our thinking. Most people will identify with think that everything they think is them. They are in charge. That's true. She did this and he did that, And it was, or she was, or they were really awful, or they cheated me and so on. Maybe they did. So what? It's their problem. Of course, it could affect you very deeply, but even if somebody cheats us, do we have to turn our mind into a universe of misery? Do we? We can just recognize that if somebody has done something very unskillful, something very, dishonest, something, but we can have the confidence that it is possible to deal with this kind of situation without making our mind sick. Without making our mind in a state of ill health, without making our mind depressed, miserable, angry, and frustrated. And this is a new, a new school for us, a new school of life, because very often we tend to, we tend to think that unless we react and we go onto a battle and struggle and so on, nothing will happen. So so through the means of meditation, and of course not just meditation, but also the aspect of sila, virtue or skillful conduct, the 5 precepts, for example, the commitment to non-harming, the commitment to not stealing, the commitment to sexual, not acting on sexual misconduct, not using one's energy to take advantage of others, the commitment to not lie, the commitment to not take drugs and intoxicants, create a foundation for our mind and body to feel happier. It might take a while, because if you're used to drugs and drinks and so on, or anything to annihilate the mind, then it takes a while for the mind to actually stand on its own without all this kind of, things that support its wakefulness, even though it, drags the mind into a deeper state of sleep. The illusion that you can feel better when you take drugs or drink or so on. So, as you look at the mind and you see that the impermanence of your thoughts, the impermanence of your perceptions, and also you can begin to see that the quality, our thoughts are, once you've tasted for a few seconds even a mind which is not caught into thinking, you begin to see that thoughts are quite heavy. They're like a cloud passing through a clear sky, you know. And that's when people then come to me and say, "Sister, how can I stop thinking?" They love that clear sky for a few seconds, and then they're hoping that it will be there forever. And I say, just don't worry about it. You know. You can't stop thinking when you think you should stop thinking. Thinking just disappears when you don't mind it anymore, when you don't feel it, when you don't fuel it, when you don't have this presumption that it should not be there. Why shouldn't it be? If you start looking at it really as you see them in meditation, like cloud passing through the sky, coming and going, why suddenly one thought seems to be sticking more deeply into one's skin and suddenly make you feel that you've got to go into a war with something, you know? Why? I wonder. Ask yourselves sometime. It's really interesting to see how delusions work. You know, a thought that in your, as I said earlier, in your retreat at Amaravati, sitting quietly in front of the shrine, you see, yes, I've lost my bank account, I've lost everything, yes, anicca, dukkha, anatta, yes, yeah. Lost £1 million, fine. Lost my job, lost my wife. Look at the feeling, yeah, and feel the feeling. Loss, yeah, okay. And then you go back to the world and suddenly you can see how everything solidifies again. You know, everything again becomes real. And don't think you've done anything wrong. It's the nature of the mind. That's how it works, you know. You haven't done anything. It's just consciousness when it's kind of, go back to a world which is extremely complex, extremely filled with so many things. It's not so easy to fill the space around thinking, is it? Because there's a lot of preoccupations, a lot of demands on on oneself, at work, in the family, and so on. It's not always easy to look at the world of the world that you inhabit, from the perspective of Dhamma. So, what is more important is that as you look through your world of thinking, as you begin to really be conscious of the way your mind thinks. Some people think they're really nice. When they look at their mind, suddenly they have all these nasty thoughts, going on and on for weeks on end. Some people said that to me. They thought they were really nice. And then they go on retreat for a while, and there's been like this kind of negative monster in there, criticizing everybody. I was one of them. I thought I was really nice before I became a nun. Then you go into a retreat and, you sound, it's not even inside, it's actually outside, just around you. It's like, she should be doing that, and that's no good, and why does he do this, and she should meditate longer, and why does he, walk like that, and so on, Why do they look so kind of holy, and I can't stand that kind of holy look. Why do they sort of pretend they're Buddhas, Can't stand it, And then when not like that, they should be more Buddha-like, Why should she look such a kind of, unholy, to keep it to this word, So, our mind is, I call it a sweet liar because my relationship is much easier these days. It's like, I don't have to become my mind. Of course I do become my mind, often enough. But at least I know, it's like a kind of decision, part of me, deciding to do one thing over another, or, again, options. And I think talking about option brings me to this aspect of freedom, because when we have no option, that's when we feel really stuck, don't we? And that's where we feel like we really maybe can't handle a situation because we have no option, because we think maybe we have to deal with the situation externally. We don't realize sometimes we have this situation, external situation has been created by not just me, but many circumstances, many conditions have created a particular situation. It's not just me, which people tend to think. I'm the one, because of me, everything happened, he died because of me, or she, had a nervous breakdown because of me, or, my mother hated me because of me, even when I was in the womb, So we kind of make ourselves terribly responsible. I remember when I was young, for many years, my parents were perfect, They could never imagine my parents being imperfect in any way, till I became a bit more adult and realized they were human like me. And we're not perfect. It's like we tend to want our parents to be perfect, because we expect ourselves to be perfect. So when you see that thoughts are empty, unsatisfactory, in relationship to the mind that is at peace with itself, at peace with its thoughts, we can actually have a mind that thinks and feel free. That we don't have to get rid of our thought to stop thinking. We can just disentangle, disidentify ourselves and look at our thought, train the mind to look at thoughts as an object in the mind, rather than me, a subject, as an object. And this object will come back, especially if you don't want it. Once you're at peace with something like that, with your thoughts, once you have seen it again and again, this is not me, not mine, this is not me, and absolutely not me, it's got nothing to do with this, just memory. Thing come back. Then it just drops away. It works, I can tell you, I can assure you, it drops away. It's amazing, it works. It's not it's not something that the Buddha concocted 2,500 years ago. If you let the karma run itself, run out, it goes. The memory goes, the thought disappear, the story disappear. It does go, but not because you did not want it, but because you've seen it so well, so clearly, it's just completely redundant. It has nothing, there's no fuel left to keep it going. There's no fuel. Mindfulness cut the fuel of delusion. Do you understand? It cuts the fuel. But sometimes we're not mindful long enough to really see the difference between a few liters of fuels and 20 liters of fuels. We don't see the difference between, the difference between how much we fuel what we experience. But once you see clearly cause and effect, then this interest I was talking to you at the beginning is really aroused. Because you see, it works. You know that when these conditions are there, the result follows suit. And so, and then you learn to develop thoughts that are part of the path of skillfulness, wholesomeness, the thoughts that support your Dharma practice, your path of liberation. Liberation from what? This kind of letting go of the karma that creates suffering in your mind, suffering in your life, and that is really disempowering your strength, your inner potential. It's destructive. So, constructive thinking, what is that? Like metta, like forgiveness. We just had a whole summer camp on the theme of gratitude. To nourish the heart with thoughts that are going to make it happy. But it's not a diet we're used to. Like being critical, the weather is miserable, my friend can't stand me, blah, blah, blah. All the negativity, we feel emotionally very comfortable with that. Having a moan in England is just a delicious moment. Isn't it? Not just in England, don't worry, everywhere. But I know it's really sweet, you know. It's like having a little moan about the weather. I know, I've learned now how to interpret the emotional resonance of that moaning. And the emotional resonance is comfort. Something really happy, it's connection, you know, with somebody. The weather is really, you know, your dog, the weather, create a lot of connection, a heart connection in England. Moaning together, it's really something really nice about your wife, your husband, your children, the weather, you know. It's funny, isn't it? So you can see the layers, you know. There's some layers about this, how a moan might make somebody miserable and another moan can make somebody more happy. But it's still a moan, which means it's still a miserable thinking. And in the long run, if it becomes a habit, it's not so good. So I would think it would be much better to develop not a moaning critical mind, but, you know, we don't want to be a happy clappy type, you know, or, I can't remember the name, you know, when you're always happy, happy, happy. Anyway, but we certainly want to nurture the heart with the food that brings it life, makes it alive, inspires you, you know, uplifts you, wakes you up, you know. So, this is when thoughts become our good friends, you know. And of course, if you start obsessing with metta, people can start really being angry around you because they can't stand you having all this kind of metta everywhere. I have been one of those. I can't stand metta, you know, because all this kind of sweet feelings, you know. Kind of gooey sweetness, you know, sort of liking everybody and having to be nice and friendly all the time. Under pressure. You know, not free, but under pressure, feeling that. And nobody pressurizes anybody else except oneself. Remember that. If you see somebody kind of really kind and loving, you know, I mean, now I've grown up a bit. But in the early days, I remember, you know, that used to empower the monster of anger in me, you know, it's like, you know, raging. I said, how could she or he, you know, be so sweet looking and be nice all the time? Do you know what I mean? But it's like, that's how you begin to learn how stupid one is, you know. You know, you begin to see your own conditioning. And that monastery is very good for that. You can hang out with yourself just the way you like, you know. I mean, we have precepts and so on, but within yourself, you know, you can actually just, you know, die to yourself. Nobody will bother. You know, you don't have anything to show. The only thing the only thing that give you little medals, if there are any medals, is like the less you become you know, as a person, the better. And of course people say, well, if I don't become a person, then I'll die. I won't be, who is left? Well, just find out, you know. I've left quite a bit of me, so, you know, but I feel very sort of pretty alive still, you know. I mean, there must be somebody there, I don't know. I haven't found anybody, but it just keeps going. So, you know, I don't need to be an I, you know, I don't need to be me, you know, sort of, and I would encourage you, you know, we're coming to 3:00, so it's, this talk will end soon, but I really encourage you to, since we are on this topic of thought and how to stop thinking, to remember that, there are ways of stopping to think, but not in the way we usually think. Normally, if I stop thinking, I have to find a tool that stops me from thinking. No. You begin to, you know, the tool to stop your thinking is to realize that your thoughts in the first place haven't got any reality in the way you think. If you make your thoughts real, then you have problems. But if your thoughts, we begin to see, you know, that what you think is only a temporary form in your mind. And the awareness, this refuge in awareness, this refuge, the mind that is aware, conscious, knowing, cognizant, that kind of mind, you begin to see as a refuge, a true refuge, in the sense that it has amazing power of intelligence, of wisdom, of capacity to deal with situation in a way that the dualistic mind that think I like, I don't like all the time, the mind that is not caught up in that kind of duality, begin to see things much more clearly. And interestingly, it's suddenly respond to situation in a way that seem to be so much more appropriate, so much more able to solve things in a way that it does not create karma, I call it. It does not create heavy results, because that mind is much more that refuge of awareness, consciousness, knowing, seem to be so connected with a wholesome mind. And I personally, quite a number of years ago, more than 10 years ago, I did a week of Abhidhamma, the higher teaching of psychology in Buddhism. That's always very impressive. Abhidhamma, high Dhamma. Well, by the end of it, the person who was a friend teaching told me, actually nobody quite knows whether it's, did the Buddha go to see his mother and teach the Abhidhamma or not? Mind you, there are Westerners, specialists on the Abhidhamma, so they may be skeptical as well. We don't know yet. But one thing I learned during that week, and that was really worth it, and I have to go back to the book to make sure this is really what I understood, but it's one moment of mindfulness drag in their trail almost, I think, 30 wholesome mental states. Do you understand? 30. I don't know. I trust the Buddha. So, which means when you're mindful, there's a whole kind of potentiality there for wholesome response. One moment. And I've got one more talk during this Vasa, and I'll come back, check the book just to make sure. If you come back, I'll verify that this is true. But it doesn't surprise me, in the sense that when we are mindful, in fact, it does surprise me in the sense that I always surprise myself to be so skillful and more, so much more able to think wholesomely and kindly and lovingly and intelligently even, when I'm mindful. When I'm not mindful, I tend to be, I notice, reactive, and reaction is always an old response. It's like a hurt response or something, hurt or, jaggled a bit, or something in you has been like shaken a little bit or whatever. It happens before we even know it, And when people go on retreat, they say, they do a week retreat, 10-day retreat, weekend retreat, and they feel very, very peaceful. Their mind has completely calmed down. Everything is sort of, they see everything clearly. And I've been through this myself. We see things clearly. And there's this astonishing belief that could carry on forever. Have you noticed that in your retreat? The astonishing capacity to believe that this is reality. Wonderful. That shows you immediately what the mind is at, isn't it? It clings desperately to what it likes. I like that, and I am not going to disidentify myself from that peace that I found on the retreat. No way. I'm going to be this peaceful person for the rest of my life. So I always give talks, at the end of the retreat we have talks about how to go from the retreat to quote unquote the real world, So I start talking about, you knock at the door at your house or your flat and be careful. You might have the halo of a saint, I am sure, but you might be the only one who knows it. Everybody else will just see the old Susie and the old John that left the washing up a week ago and didn't walk the dog for 1 week, and is just that stupid idiot that just is totally unhelpful, wasted a whole week on the retreat doing nothing, and left me in the lurch. So you might be the only one who actually saw the halo and the beauty of your heart, the way your heart has turned into the gorgeous landscape, inner landscape, that's sort of so beautiful and trusting and confident. And even when you feel, even when everything goes wrong around you for a few days, everything is okay. Why? Because you are still in your refuge. You're still able to hold that radiance, that brightness of your refuge. And somebody who is here, who is going to stay here for a while, was telling me that after doing, I think it was just a day, a retreat, 2 days retreat in Paris with me, she felt, she had this, I have a special relationship with bees. We have a special connection, she said, like, for 2 days, she felt everything was okay. It's interesting, because that's a piece of the refuge, or knowing, And the life came back normally, just as it did before, but the heart was okay. And the difference is that you were aware, This quality of awareness was strong enough for you to not crash with everything crashing around you, small and big waves, That's the difference, If your mind might be just the same, but everything is okay, it's okay. Your response to it is that loving, accepting, and metta, I wanted to say, is not just about being kind, but it's also, as I was reflecting on today, when I was thinking about this topic, I thought, metta is also the quality of the heart that is not bound up with reactivity. Do you understand? When you have metta, you become less stupid, because you don't just react to things. Do you understand? You have the spaciousness, the kindness in you to be, okay, I can see this, but my response doesn't have to be a reaction. Just seeing is enough. And trusting that the seeing will do all the work. So, usually we have our dear La here doing tea. We don't have tea anymore here, do we? It's really weird. What's going on here? Hey? Who is talking? Is there a little voice at the back? Oh, okay. So I think we can just stop there, shall we?